The champagne glass hit the marble floor with a sharp crack that echoed through the ballroom. Time seemed to freeze as my father collapsed, his body hitting the ground with a sickening thud. The elegant fundraiser turned into chaos in seconds. Women screamed, men shouted orders, and someone knocked over a chair rushing to help. "Call 911, my mother shrieked, her voice cutting through the noise. I pushed through the crowd of shocked guests, my heart pounding against my ribs. Uncle Kieran was already kneeling beside my father, pressing 2 fingers against his neck. His face looked worried, but something in his eyes seemed wrong, almost like relief. "Dad, can you hear me?" I whispered, dropping to my knees beside him. His eyes opened slightly, unfocused and glassy. "It's all gone, Violet," he gasped, gripping my hand weakly. "The investments? Kieran said they were safe." His words sent ice through my veins. Before I could ask what he meant, the paramedics burst through the doors. As they loaded him onto a stretcher, I caught Uncle Kieran watching from across the room. When our eyes met, he quickly looked away. Something was terribly wrong. "My name is Violet Peterson, and that night changed everything. I'm 28, work as a financial analyst for a small firm downtown, and I've always been good with numbers. Growing up, I was the quiet kid who preferred books to parties. My father always said I had a gift for seeing patterns others missed. Dad owned 3 rental properties in the city, our family home in the suburbs, and a small farm that had been in our family for decades. He worked hard his whole life, building wealth slowly and carefully. Uncle Kieran, his younger brother, always seemed jealous of Dad's success. Kieran had charm but no money. He was the type who talked big but never followed through. He sold insurance and was always chasing get-rich-quick schemes. For years, he borrowed money from Dad and rarely paid it back. 2 months ago, Kieran came to Dad with an incredible opportunity. He said he'd found investors willing to buy all of Dad's properties at premium prices. The money would go into a special investment fund that guaranteed huge returns. I begged Dad not to trust him, but Kieran was family. Dad signed everything over, believing his brother would make him rich. Now Dad was in the hospital, and I had a terrible feeling we'd lost everything. The hospital waiting room smelled like disinfectant and fear. I sat in an uncomfortable plastic chair, watching the clock tick past midnight. Mom paced the hallway, wringing her hands and muttering prayers under her breath. Uncle Kieran had followed the ambulance to the hospital. He sat across from me, occasionally checking his phone and sighing dramatically. Every few minutes, he'd pat Mom's shoulder and whisper something comforting. The doctors say he had a severe panic attack. A nurse told us around 2 a.m. His blood pressure was dangerously high. We're keeping him overnight for observation. After the nurse left, I watched Kieran carefully. Instead of looking relieved that Dad was okay, he seemed almost disappointed. He kept glancing at his watch like he had somewhere important to be. "I should call my office," he said suddenly. "Let them know what happened." He stepped into the hallway to make his call. Through the glass window, I could see him talking animatedly on his phone. He wasn't calling his office at this hour. Something about his body language made my stomach twist. When he returned, he had a strange expression on his face, almost like he was trying not to smile. "Everything okay?" I asked. "Fine," he said quickly. "Just work stuff." But I knew he was lying. The next morning, Dad was awake but looked terrible. His face was pale, and his hands shook when he tried to drink water. Mom fussed over him, fluffing his pillows and adjusting his blanket every few minutes. "The investments," Dad whispered to me when Mom stepped out. "I need to check on them." "What exactly did you invest in?" I asked, pulling out my notebook. His eyes filled with worry. Kieran said it was a real estate development fund. Luxury condos downtown. He showed me all the paperwork, said we'd double our money in 6 months. My heart sank. "Dad, what paperwork exactly?" "Contracts, building permits, investor agreements. Everything looked official." He paused, studying my face. "Why do you look like that?" I didn't want to worry him more, but I had to know. "Did you verify any of it independently?" "Kieran is my brother," Dad said weakly. "Why would he lie?" I squeezed his hand gently. "I'm going to look into this, okay? Don't stress about it right now." But inside I was already planning. My years of analyzing financial documents had taught me how to spot fraud. If Kieran had cheated Dad, I would find proof. And then I would make him pay. That afternoon, I drove to Dad's house to search for the investment documents. Mom was still at the hospital, so I had the place to myself. Dad's home office was usually organized, but papers were scattered everywhere like someone had been searching for something. I found the investment folder in Dad's desk drawer. The documents looked professional at first glance, but as I studied them closer, red flags appeared everywhere. The company letterhead was slightly blurred, like it had been photocopied. The building permits had dates that didn't match the construction timeline. Most importantly, the bank routing numbers on the wire transfer receipts led to an account I didn't recognize. I called Dad's bank pretending to verify a transaction. The representative confirmed my worst fears. All of Dad's money had been transferred to Peterson Holdings LLC. Peterson was Kieran's last name before he changed it to match ours when Grandpa adopted him. He'd created a fake company using his old name, hoping no one would make the connection. My hands trembled as I photographed every document. Dad had lost everything to his own brother's lies. The rental properties were already sold, the family farm was gone, and our home had a second mortgage that Kieran had somehow convinced Dad to sign. Uncle Kieran hadn't just stolen Dad's money. He'd destroyed our entire family legacy. I spent the next 3 days digging deeper into Kieran's scheme. Using my access to financial databases at work, I traced the money trail. The funds from Dad's properties had gone through several shell companies before landing in Kieran's personal accounts. He'd used fake construction permits, forged investor agreements, and even created a fake website for the development company. Everything was designed to fool Dad into believing the investment was legitimate. But the most shocking discovery came when I searched property records. Kieran had already purchased an expensive downtown condo and a new BMW with Dad's money. He was living the luxury lifestyle that Dad's life savings had paid for. I printed out everything I'd found and organized it into a clear timeline. The evidence was overwhelming, but I needed more than just financial records. I needed proof that Kieran had intentionally deceived Dad. That's when I remembered something. Dad always recorded important business calls for his own protection. If he'd recorded his conversations with Kieran about the investment, those recordings might still be on his office computer. I drove back to Dad's house, hoping to find the evidence that would destroy Kieran once and for all. The recordings were exactly where I expected them to be. Dad's computer contained hours of recorded phone conversations. I found the folder labeled Kieran Investment and clicked play on the first file. Kieran's voice filled the room, smooth and convincing. "Trust me, Tommy. This is the opportunity of a lifetime. My contacts in the development company are giving us insider access before it goes public." I listened to weeks of conversations where Kieran gradually convinced Dad to sell everything. He used emotional manipulation, talking about how the family had always stuck together, and how this was their chance to secure Mom's future. In one recording, Dad expressed doubts about moving so fast. Kieran's response made my blood boil. "You don't trust your own brother? After everything I've done for this family." The final recording was from 3 days before Dad's collapse. Kieran was pressuring Dad to sign the last documents to complete the transfers. "Once this is done, we'll both be rich," Kieran promised. "You'll be able to retire early and spoil Mom like she deserves." Dad's voice sounded tired but hopeful. "You're sure this is legitimate? Would I risk my relationship with my brother and his beautiful wife for money?" Kieran laughed. "This is about family, Tommy. Always has been." The way he said beautiful wife made me pause the recording. There was something in his tone that sounded wrong, almost possessive. I had a horrible new suspicion about Kieran's real motives. Over the next few days, I started paying closer attention to how Kieran interacted with Mom at the hospital. He brought her coffee every morning, stayed late into the evening, and always found reasons to touch her arm or shoulder when they talked. Mom seemed grateful for his support, but she'd always been naive about people's true intentions. She saw kindness where I saw calculation. "Kieran has been such a blessing," she told me one evening as we walked to the parking garage. "I don't know how I'd handle all this without him." "Mom, don't you think it's strange that Dad's investment failed right after Kieran recommended it?" She stopped walking and stared at me. Violet, that's a terrible thing to say. Kieran lost money too. Did he? How do you know? He told me. He's just as devastated as we are. Her voice had an edge I rarely heard. I wanted to show her the evidence I'd gathered, but I knew she wouldn't believe me. Not yet. She needed to see Kieran's true nature for herself. I'm just worried about you, I said carefully. Dad's only been in the hospital for a week, and Kieran is already acting like. Like what? Like he's trying to replace Dad. Mom's face went cold. Your uncle is helping our family during a crisis. You should be grateful instead of suspicious. But I wasn't wrong about Kieran. I just needed to prove it. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. Dad's neighbor, Mrs. Williams, called me at work the next day. She was an elderly woman who spent most of her time watching the neighborhood from her front window. Violet, dear, I hope your father is feeling better, she said. I wanted to ask you about something I saw. What is it, Mrs. Williams? Well, yesterday afternoon I saw your uncle at your parents' house. He had keys and let himself in. He was there for about an hour, carrying boxes to his car. My stomach dropped. Are you sure it was yesterday? Mom was at the hospital all day. Oh yes, I'm certain. I was watering my roses when he arrived. He made several trips back and forth. Looked like he was moving things out. I thanked Mrs. Williams and immediately drove to Dad's house. Sure enough, several items were missing from Dad's office. His laptop, important files, and the safe where he kept important documents were all gone. Kieran was covering his tracks, removing evidence that could expose his lies. But he'd made one crucial mistake. He didn't know that I'd already copied everything I needed. I called the police to report the theft, but I didn't mention Kieran by name yet. I wanted to catch him red-handed first. Setting up a trap would require careful planning, but I had an idea that might work. I created a fake email account and sent Kieran a message pretending to be a potential investor who'd heard about his real estate development fund. I claimed to have $50,000 ready to invest and wanted to meet as soon as possible. Kieran responded within an hour, eager to set up a meeting. We arranged to meet at an upscale coffee shop downtown the next afternoon. I planned to record our conversation while wearing a hidden microphone I'd borrowed from a friend who worked in journalism. The next day, I arrived early and chose a table in the corner where I could see the entire cafe. Kieran walked in exactly on time, wearing an expensive suit that I was sure Dad's money had paid for. Ms. Anderson, he said, extending his hand. I'd used a fake name in my emails. That's me. Thank you for meeting with me on such short notice. For the next hour, Kieran gave me the exact same sales pitch he'd used on Dad. He showed me the same fake documents, made the same promises about guaranteed returns, and used the same emotional manipulation tactics. This is about more than money, he said earnestly. It's about building something lasting for your family. The irony of his words made me sick. He was destroying families, not building them. When he asked for my bank information to wire the investment, I told him I needed a few days to arrange the transfer. He seemed disappointed but agreed to wait. I had everything I needed to destroy him. That evening, I visited Dad in the hospital with printed copies of all my evidence. Mom had gone home to shower and change clothes, so we had privacy to talk. Dad, I need to show you something important, I said, sitting beside his bed. I laid out the financial documents, the property records, and transcripts from our recorded phone calls. Dad's face went through a range of emotions as he read through everything. Confusion, disbelief, anger, and finally heartbreak. He stole everything, Dad whispered, his voice breaking. My own brother destroyed us. There's more, Dad. I think Kieran has feelings for Mom. The way he talks about her, the way he's been hovering around her since you got sick. I think this was always about more than just money. Dad's hands clenched into fists. He's trying to take my wife too? I think that was always the plan. Ruin you financially, swoop in as the hero who helps Mom through the crisis, and eventually replace you completely. Dad closed his eyes and took several deep breaths. When he opened them again, his expression was determined. What do? We expose him. But we need to be smart about it. If we accuse him directly, he'll deny everything and probably disappear with the money. Dad nodded slowly. What's your plan? We make him confess in front of witnesses. And I think I know exactly how to do it. My plan required perfect timing and a little bit of luck. Dad was being discharged from the hospital in 2 days, and Mom wanted to have a family dinner to celebrate his recovery. She'd already invited Kieran, which gave me the opportunity one needed. I convinced Mom to hold the dinner at a local restaurant instead of at home. I chose a place where I knew the manager and could arrange for our conversation to be recorded. I also invited Dad's lawyer and accountant, telling them Dad wanted to discuss some important financial matters. The day before the dinner, I called Kieran and told him I'd decided to invest the $50,000. I asked if he could bring the final paperwork to dinner, so we could complete the transaction in front of my family. Your family? Kieran sounded surprised. My uncle and aunt. I lied smoothly. They raised me after my parents died. I want them to witness this important investment. Kieran agreed, probably thinking he was about to steal money from another family. His greed was going to be his downfall. Everything was set. Tomorrow night, Kieran would walk into a room full of witnesses expecting to commit another fraud. Instead, he was going to confess to destroying our family. I just hoped my plan would work. The dinner started exactly as I'd planned. Mom fussed over Dad, making sure he was comfortable and had everything he needed. Kieran arrived fashionably late, carrying a leather briefcase that I assumed contained his fake investment documents. You look much better, Tommy, Kieran said, patting Dad's shoulder. Ready to get back to making money? Dad forced a smile. Actually, I wanted to discuss our investment tonight. Violet's brought some friends who might be interested in joining the fund. I introduced Kieran to Dad's lawyer and accountant, describing them as my aunt and uncle. Kieran's eyes lit up when he heard they were interested in investing. This is perfect timing, Kieran said, opening his briefcase. I brought all the paperwork we discussed. He spread the same fake documents across the table that he'd shown me at the coffee shop. Dad's lawyer immediately started asking detailed questions about the development company, the construction timeline, and the expected returns. Kieran answered confidently, repeating the lies he'd rehearsed so many times. He had no idea that every word was being recorded by the hidden microphones I'd placed around our table. The building permits were approved last month, Kieran said. Construction starts next week. That was his first major mistake. The building permits he was showing us were dated 6 months ago, not last month. Can you tell us more about the development company? Dad's accountant asked. I'd like to verify their track record before my clients invest. Kieran shifted uncomfortably, but maintained his confident smile. Blackwood Development has been building luxury properties for over a decade. They're very selective about their investors. Another lie. Blackwood Development didn't exist. I'd already checked with the State Business Registration Office. And you said my brother's investment has already shown returns? Dad asked innocently. Absolutely. Tommy's initial investment has grown by 30% already. He should see the full returns within the next few months. Mom beamed with pride, but Dad's face remained neutral. That's wonderful news. Could you show us the account statements? Kieran hesitated for the first time all evening. I don't have them with me tonight, but I can email them tomorrow. Actually, I said, pulling out my phone. I think there might be some confusion about Dad's investment returns. I opened the banking app that Dad had given me access to. According to his account, all the money was transferred out 3 months ago. There haven't been any returns deposited. Kieran's confident expression faltered. There must be a delay in the system. These things sometimes take time to process. 3 months. Dad's lawyer raised an eyebrow. That seems like a very long delay for electronic transfers. The trap was closing around Kieran, and he was starting to panic. Maybe we should discuss this privately, Kieran said, sweat beading on his forehead. Family business shouldn't be shared with strangers. These aren't strangers, Dad said firmly. They're helping me understand what happened to my life savings. I pulled out the folder of evidence I'd compiled and placed it on the table. Kieran, we know about Peterson Holdings LLC. We know about the fake building permits. We know about the forged investor agreements. Kieran's face went white. I don't know what you're talking about. We have recordings of your phone calls with Dad. We have bank records showing where the money really went. We know you bought a condo and a BMW with Dad's savings. You're lying, Kieran said, but his voice cracked. Dad leaned forward, his voice steady and cold. My own brother stole everything from me. The rental properties that took me 20 years to buy. The farm that's been in our family for generations. The money I saved for my wife's retirement. Mom stared at Kieran in shock. Is this true? Kieran looked around the table desperately, realizing he was cornered. It's not what you think. I was trying to help. The investment was real, but it failed. These things happen in business. No, I said, sliding the printed bank records across the table. The investment never existed. You created fake companies and forged documents to steal Dad's money. The restaurant had gone quiet around us. Other diners were starting to stare. I can explain everything, Kieran said, his voice rising in panic. Tommy, you have to believe me. I would never deliberately hurt our family. Then explain this, Dad said, holding up a bank statement. Explain why your personal account received a deposit of $300,000 the same day my properties were sold. Kieran opened and closed his mouth like a fish gasping for air. The evidence was overwhelming, and he knew it. And explain this, I added, playing an audio recording on my phone. Kieran's voice filled the restaurant. Once this is done, we'll both be rich. You'll be able to retire early and spoil Mom like she deserves. Mom gasped when she heard the recording. You called me Mom. Kieran's face crumpled. Helen, I can explain. I've always cared about you. More than just as a sister-in-law. The confession hung in the air like a toxic cloud. Dad stood up slowly, his hands trembling with rage. You destroyed my family because you wanted my wife. It wasn't supposed to happen like this, Kieran pleaded. The money was just supposed to be temporary. I was going to pay it back once Helen realized that I could take better care of her than you ever could. Mom buried her face in her hands. Oh my God, Kieran. What have you done? The lawyer and accountant exchanged glances. They'd witnessed enough evidence to support criminal charges for fraud, embezzlement and forgery. Kieran was finished. I'm calling the police, Dad's lawyer announced, pulling out her phone. Wait. Kieran jumped up from his chair. Please, we can work this out privately. I'll pay everything back. I'll transfer the money tonight. With what money? I asked coldly. You already spent it on your new lifestyle. Kieran looked around frantically, finally understanding that his lies had caught up with him. I can get loans. I can sell the condo. Just don't involve the police. You stole $300,000, Dad said. You forged legal documents. You committed fraud against multiple financial institutions. This isn't something we can handle privately. Mom finally looked up, her eyes red with tears. How could you do this to us? We trusted you. We treated you like family. You are family, Kieran said desperately. Helen, I love you. I've loved you for years. Tommy doesn't appreciate what he has, but I would worship you. Dad lunged toward Kieran, but I caught his arm. He's not worth it, Dad. The police arrived within 10 minutes. Kieran tried to run when he saw them approaching, but the restaurant's back exit was locked. He was arrested at our table while the entire restaurant watched. As they handcuffed him, Kieran looked back at Mom one last time. I did this for us, Helen. For our future together. Mom turned away, unable to look at him. The next few weeks were a blur of legal meetings, court hearings, and insurance claims. Kieran was charged with multiple felonies, including fraud, embezzlement, and forgery. The evidence I'd gathered made the prosecution's case overwhelming. Dad's lawyer worked tirelessly to recover as much money as possible. The condo Kieran had purchased was seized by the court, along with his BMW and other assets bought with stolen funds. We recovered about 60% of the original investment, which was better than nothing, but still left our family financially devastated. The rental properties and the family farm were gone forever. The new owners had purchased them legally and had no obligation to sell them back. Dad's dream of leaving a legacy for future generations had been destroyed by his own brother's greed. Mom struggled emotionally more than anyone. She blamed herself for not seeing Kieran's true intentions sooner. She'd trusted him, enjoyed his attention, and felt guilty that her kindness had somehow encouraged his obsession. "I should have known," she said repeatedly. "I should have seen the signs." But Kieran had been manipulative and patient. He'd spent years building trust and creating opportunities to betray it. The damage he'd caused would take years to repair. 6 months after Kieran's arrest, our family was slowly learning to rebuild. Dad found a job with his former business partner, taking a significant pay cut but grateful to be working again. Mom went back to the nursing job she'd retired from 5 years earlier. I moved back into my childhood bedroom to help with expenses. The house felt empty without Dad's enthusiasm for his investments and properties, but we were together, and that mattered more than money. Kieran was sentenced to 8 years in prison. He'd attempted to plea bargain by offering to reveal the locations of hidden assets, but the investigation showed he'd spent nearly everything. His apology letter to the family was returned unopened. None of us wanted to hear his excuses. The most difficult part was explaining everything to extended family and friends. Some people blamed Dad for being too trusting. Others blamed Mom for being friendly with Kieran. A few even suggested that I should have detected the fraud sooner with my financial background. But we knew the truth. Kieran had spent years planning his betrayal, carefully building trust while positioning himself to destroy it. He'd exploited our family's love and loyalty to fulfill his own selfish desires. The only consolation was knowing he would never have the opportunity to hurt another family the way he'd hurt ours. A year later, I was promoted to senior analyst at my firm. The experience of investigating Kieran's fraud had taught me new skills in forensic accounting that made me valuable to my employer. I specialized in helping families recover from financial fraud, using my painful experience to help others. Dad's health improved once the stress of the legal proceedings ended. He started a small consulting business helping elderly people protect themselves from investment scams. He spoke at community centers and senior living facilities, sharing his story as a warning to others. Mom gradually regained her confidence and trust in people. She joined a support group for fraud victims and eventually became a peer counselor, helping other women who'd been manipulated by people they trusted. We celebrated Dad's birthday at the same restaurant where we'd confronted Kieran. It felt like reclaiming a space that had been tainted by betrayal and lies. "I'm proud of how we handled this," Dad said, raising his glass. "We could have let it destroy us, but we chose to fight back." "To fighting back," Mom agreed, clinking her glass against his. "To family," I added. "Real family that protects each other instead of preying on each other." We'd lost most of our financial security, but we'd gained something more valuable. The knowledge that we could survive anything as long as we faced it together. 2 years after the trial, I received an unexpected phone call. It was Kieran's attorney, informing me that Kieran wanted to meet with our family. He claimed he had important information about additional hidden assets that could help with our financial recovery. I discussed it with my parents, and we unanimously decided against meeting with him. We'd moved on with our lives and didn't want to give Kieran another opportunity to manipulate us. "He's probably lying anyway," Dad said. "And even if he isn't, the emotional cost isn't worth whatever money he might have hidden." Mom agreed. "I never want to see him again. I never want to hear his voice or have to remember how easily he fooled me." The attorney called back several times, insisting that Kieran was genuinely remorseful and wanted to make amends. We maintained our position. Some relationships can't be repaired, and some betrayals can't be forgiven. Kieran had made his choices, and now he had to live with the consequences. We'd made our choice too, to move forward without him in our lives. 3 months later, we heard through Dad's former business partner that Kieran had been transferred to a different prison after getting into fights with other inmates. Apparently, his charm and manipulation tactics didn't work as well in prison as they did in the outside world. We felt no satisfaction in hearing about his struggles. We simply felt nothing at all. On the 3rd anniversary of Dad's collapse at the fundraiser, we decided to have a family celebration. We'd paid off most of our debts, rebuilt our emergency savings, and were finally feeling financially stable again. I'd been promoted again, and was earning more money than ever before. Dad's consulting business was thriving, and he'd written a book about protecting yourself from financial fraud that was being published by a small press. Mom had been accepted into a graduate program to become a licensed counselor specializing in fraud recovery. We were different people than we'd been 3 years ago. Stronger, more cautious, but also more grateful for what we had. I've been thinking about something, Dad said over dinner. Kieran took our properties and our savings, but he couldn't take our knowledge or our ability to earn. In some ways, we're better off now than we were before. How do you figure that? I asked. Before I was complacent. I thought having assets made me secure, so I stopped being careful. Now I know that real security comes from your skills, your relationships, and your ability to rebuild when life knocks you down. Mom nodded. And we know who our real family is. Before, I thought Kieran was part of our family because he shared our name. Now I know that family is about loyalty and love, not blood. I raised my water glass. To real family, real security, and real happiness. We'd learned that money could be stolen, but character couldn't be bought. 5 years later, I was married to a wonderful man named Tyler, who understood our family's history and respected the strength we'd shown in overcoming it. We were expecting our first child, and Dad couldn't stop talking about becoming a grandfather. Mom had graduated from her counseling program and opened a practice specializing in helping families recover from betrayal and fraud. She'd found her calling in helping others heal from the kind of trauma we'd experienced. Dad's book had become a minor bestseller in the personal finance category. He'd been invited to speak at conferences and had even appeared on a few television shows to discuss financial fraud prevention. We'd never recovered the family farm or the rental properties, but we'd built something better. A family business dedicated to protecting others from the kind of betrayal we'd suffered. I sometimes wonder what would have happened if Kieran had just asked for help instead of stealing from us. Mom said during one of our weekly family dinners. He would have asked for a loan, never paid it back, and eventually tried the same scheme anyway, I replied. His problem wasn't desperation. It was entitlement. He thought he deserved what Dad had earned. And he thought he deserved you, Mom, Dad added. That's what made it personal instead of just business. We'd learned to talk about Kieran's betrayal without anger or bitterness. It was simply a fact of our history, like any other major event that had shaped our lives. 10 years later, Kieran was released from prison. We heard about it through Dad's former business partner, who still kept track of local news. Kieran had served 8 years of his sentence and was being released for good behavior. None of us felt worried about his release. We'd moved to a different state 5 years earlier when Dad's consulting business expanded. Kieran wouldn't be able to find us easily, and we'd learned to protect ourselves from people like him. But more importantly, we were no longer the same people he'd betrayed. We were stronger, wiser, and surrounded by genuine friends and family who would never exploit our trust. Do you think he'll try to contact us? Mom asked when we learned about his release. Probably, I said. But it doesn't matter. We know who he really is now. Dad agreed. He can't hurt us anymore because we won't let him. We've built a life that doesn't depend on trusting people who haven't earned it. A few weeks later, Kieran did try to contact us. He sent letters to our old address that were forwarded to us by the postal service. The letters went straight into the trash, unopened. He also tried reaching out through social media, creating fake accounts to send messages. We blocked every account and reported them to the platforms. Kieran's attempts to reconnect only proved that he hadn't learned anything from his time in prison. He was still the same manipulative person who thought he could charm his way back into our lives. Today, 15 years after that terrible night at the fundraiser, our family is thriving. My daughter Sophia, named after my grandmother, is 10 years old and loves hearing stories about her grandparents' business adventures. Tyler and I have 2 more children, and Dad spoils all his grandchildren outrageously. Mom's counseling practice has helped hundreds of families recover from betrayal and fraud. She's written her own book about rebuilding trust after family betrayal, and it's become required reading in several university psychology programs. Dad retired from consulting last year, but still speaks occasionally at conferences. He's become something of an expert on family financial fraud, and law enforcement agencies sometimes consult with him on complex cases. I'm now a partner at my firm, specializing in forensic accounting and fraud investigation. My experience with Kieran's case launched my career in a direction I never expected but absolutely love. We own a beautiful home in Colorado, with a small garden that reminds Dad of the farm he lost. We've never tried to replace what Kieran stole from us. Instead, we've built something entirely new and entirely ours. Sometimes people ask if we regret trusting Kieran, or if we wish we'd been more suspicious from the beginning. The answer is no. We regret his choices, not ours. Trust is a gift, and the fact that Kieran chose to abuse it says everything about his character and nothing about ours. We learned that real wealth isn't measured in properties or bank accounts. It's measured in relationships built on genuine love and mutual respect. Kieran stole our money, but he gave us something more valuable: the knowledge that we could survive anything as long as we faced it together. The gate to our old life closed forever when Kieran was arrested. But the door to our new life opened wider than we ever imagined possible.